All right. So we're going to talk about a technique. I call it criticism escapism. All right. It's
Okay.
how to go from like criticism to heroism and disempower the ill-intended effects of criticism. And almost this is a wisdom that'll kind of serve as a guide for how to properly respond to criticism, but also to improve our sensitivity, because a lot of times we can feel like emotional burn victims, like very sensitive and touchy, and that's not fun for anyone involved. And the truth of the matter is, no matter who you are in life, you're going to get criticized at some point, right?
Absolutely.
So, in your opinion, why don't we have a conversation about it? Why should we be strategic with handling criticism? So, why should we be strategic with that?
Well, I think even if people, are quote unquote criticizing and you don't think it's deserved, sometimes there's a good lesson in there or something you could improve. And so you have to kind of separate yourself from the emotional reaction so you can actually hear the information and then be able to evaluate whether or not it really applies.
Yeah, so sometimes there's a good lesson we might get if we don't get rattled by it. You know, there's an opportunity. Instead of it being an obstacle, there could be an opportunity. And sometimes I think it's important too that sometimes people criticize because they're angry, and
Mm-hmm.
they're satisfied only if they can make you angry too,
Yes.
right?
I know that
Have
one.
you ever experienced that?
Oh, yes.
And sometimes it might be good to let them have a victory because it's a hollow victory. In most cases, it's just a super hollow victory. And here's the thing, too: the more virtuous you become, the more suspicious other people become. They assume if they're very stuck in ego and they can't fathom other realities other than their own, they will assume that you're not for real or that you're fake. And they will be insulted by your simple beingness and the fact that you're happy within your soul. This is human nature, So it's like, so we need to be good at handling this stuff, and this is the way that evil works. Like, evil is really the stuff that takes us away from the truth of who we really are, or ultimate truth, that kind of just sinks us in false judgments and delusions. Like, it works through it. This is an access point for it, criticizing, and then that can just lead to a downward spiral, right?
Yeah.
And I think all of us, we all get tested in the areas that we need to develop strength. If we don't get tested, how can we grow? How can we become wiser? How can we become stronger? How can we build better endurance? Right? So what seems like sometimes we don't know when the universe is doing us a favor, and sometimes criticism is a favor for reasons that may not be obvious to us at the moment. But also, like, I just want to ask you, like, when you have two people, one person is terrible at handling criticism, one person is a rock star at it. What are your general thoughts and opinions about these two individuals? How do you view them as being different? Who do you admire more? Who do you have more respect for? Who do you want to spend more time with? Like, what would be your thoughts?
Well, definitely the one who can handle criticism, because sometimes I think, and I've had trouble communicating. I don't view it as criticism, but sometimes I think a lot of conflict comes from misunderstandings. And so I'm probably an over communicator in that sense. But I think sometimes if you can say, this is what I'm hearing, or this is how I'm hearing this, and this is why I'm reacting this way, sometimes I think that can clear up a situation. But like, I've got a friend that's very sensitive to that and always thinks there's a winner and a loser. And so that's difficult for me because that's not how I view the world. I view it as, oh, we just need to talk it through and it'll clear it right up. But again, if somebody could handle criticism better, it makes me more confident going to them to try and clear things up. Whereas if they don't handle criticism well, in some ways we're less honest with each other because you might hold back from having that conversation because the message won't be received in the way that you're intending it.
Yes, I love it. So yeah, we trust people more if they're better at handling this.
Yeah.
You know? I think that's a good point. This is a way to build up your social equity. being good at handling criticism. Now, so that's a good point. Why should we be strategic with it? Now, number 2, conversation point. How can we avoid facing non-essential criticism? How can we avoid facing non-essential criticism? So what are your thoughts just off the top of your head?
In saying that it's non-essential, you mean something where it's kind of like you were talking about before, where somebody who's just like pushes or complains or criticizes just to criticize?
Yeah, or sometimes giving people an opening to criticize, right? Like,
Okay.
how can we avoid giving an opening for people to criticize?
Oh, sometimes you got to know who people are and know who you can and can't engage. um, Sometimes I think it's not, and I think I learned this early on in the group. Not everything needs to be 100% factual and corrected, because I am quite literal a lot of times. And if somebody says something and it's not quite right, I would feel the need to correct it. But it's hard for me still, but I'm learning it doesn't always matter. The details aren't always as important as the concept. And so some of it's letting go of the need for things to be perfect, and giving people space to share and not feel like every detail has to be correct in order to have a conversation.
I love it. I love it. And I love that. I love the whole point about knowing your audience, because you got to know what their psychographics are, know what they value, know what they believe, right? Because a lot of times that can help you prevent unanticipated criticism. I think another good point is, let's say you're posting an article or some sort of an informative video or writing a book. Try to get clear on what arguments or criticisms you anticipate, right? Book writers do this. They do a round of edits from the perspective of the critics so that they can find and resolve anything that critics might cherry pick and use against them.
That makes sense.
So, answer and respond to this stuff in advance. One is you can give a disclaimer. So, I've seen people do this with posts. You could say, before writing a negative comment, take a moment to, 1, research this, consider this, reflect on this, because people will form opinions without studying the facts. And then they just vomit those opinions out there, and it just adds to the mass confusion, right? Yeah. So you can just say, hey, look, your opinion matters. Please collect all the facts before coming to a conclusion. Unfortunately, uninformed opinions have led to these consequences. Innocent people getting hurt and this and that, and people getting confused and all kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
So, I know that, and I'll give you an example of how I had to do this. I posted a video of showing compassion to a raccoon, a mother raccoon. She was hungry. She came out in the daylight. It was a long winter. She wasn't able to forage food. She came in the daylight and I gave her some food, right? I took so much hate from people about rabies. Now, we don't have rabies here, but they didn't care. They didn't know. And then I did some research. I'm like, nobody in Canada has gotten rabies since 2007, and it was from a bat. And I'm like, Canada is actually really good at rabies. They drop these air packets that taste like marshmallows over any area if rabies ever pops up. So it's not even a real threat. Nobody's getting rabies here, period. But the fear of rabies is causing people to kill every raccoon they see out in daylight. But the raccoons that come out in daylight are mother raccoons. They need the extra time for foraging. So before people spread this fear that leads to hurting innocent animals, and there's Facebook groups about, raccoons out in daylight, don't kill them, it's just mothers and stuff, because they're trying to overcome that irrational fear that's just being generated and spurred forward on social media. So I might say, before writing a negative comment, do some research about actual rabies and the fact that this is an irrational fear blown out of proportion. Innocent animals are being killed because of this fear as a justification, right? So when I did that, no criticisms.
Oh, wow.
But if I didn't post a disclaimer, everyone's like, rabies, blah, blah, blah. You're an awful person, right? So that's something, just kind of addressing that in advance and challenging people to study the facts before forming an opinion. Another thing is this: acknowledge and merit or acknowledge the value and merit of those who might have a different opinion. So let's say this, somebody goes on social media and they post about how they're a vegan and this is my vegan meal and I'm about to eat it. Well, you're going to annoy and aggravate so many people who feel judged by your comment. Because so many people are going to be like, I feel like you're asserting superiority because I eat animals, I'm not compassionate. So a good way to do that is to acknowledge the merit of others and just say, look, I've eaten meat most of my life. I have nothing but love and respect for those who have meat in their diet. There's lots of great reasons to do so. For me personally, where I'm at, I'm taking a different route at this time for a number of reasons. And here's kind of how I'm exploring things. If you write something like that, then you're less likely to face non-essential criticism, right? Because you're giving respect to those who choose to be different, right? It's not the end of the world if people are eating meat. Like, let's be honest. Just
they're going to anyway.
Yeah. And I think another thing is, you mentioned it. We don't have to be factually correct. Who cares? You can write, here's what I did. Here's what I experienced. Here is my truth. You're always right when you tell your truth from your perspective. You just got to be careful about not saying the truth, because now you're implying that whatever you're saying has to be true to you too. Right?
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure that you're being very personal and sharing your truth, and people can't criticize that. They could be, it's my truth that when you go through a divorce, here's some of the emotions that come up. Right.
And I encountered that. I had somebody who told me I would be bitter. And I completely rejected that idea. I was not going to be bitter, Yeah.
And then you might criticize them. You might say, you don't know what you're talking about. And you'd be right in criticizing them. But they don't. They're overgeneralizing. We just need to make sure we don't overgeneralize.
Yeah. I like to view people as individuals. I think everybody has their own, your own reaction to things. We all come with our own history, our own past, and our own choices. So in fact, I saw so many people who were bitter after getting divorced. It did keep me from getting divorced for a while. That was something that held me back. I didn't want to be bitter. And I realized that's not who I was as a person. Going through a divorce doesn't make you bitter.
Yeah.
It
can bring that out in people. Better, not bitter.
Yes.
You can do one of two things, be better or bitter. And usually that's victim versus warrior mentality.
Yeah, it's a choice.
Right? The warrior mentality, you find a way to move forward. Victim mentality, you find an excuse and someone to blame and be bitter about.
Yeah.
It's a value choice. But those people in the victim parade, they want you to join the victim parade because that story soothes their ego. Misery loves company. Let's all be bitter. Yeah, bitter buddies. Let's be bitter buddies. So
I don't even like bitter food. Yeah, exactly.
So I think those are some good things to consider. Now, let's talk about how we might improve sensitivity and overcome hurt feelings for ourselves personally. So if you were to be your own coach, what advice would you give you to not take things personal or get sensitive?
Right now, what I do is a lot of self-talk. And I kind of have to remind myself, of other things in the past, like, different situations, what's happened to me before, or who the other person is. Here are the ways in my life that, they've been consistent or that they've behaved this way. Why I know that's not really true, even though that's how I'm reacting. Or, sometimes it's just remembering that in this moment, everything feels super important. I like to think back when you're a teenager, because when you're a teenager, everything feels like life and death. But really, none of that matters now, right? And so I keep that parallel in my head too. Like right now, something may feel really important, but in a week, nobody's going to remember this.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody criticizes you, we could just say, you know what? This situation is hopeless, but it's not serious.
Yeah.
We're probably not going to turn them around, but it's not a serious issue. right? Nobody's going to remember.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think here's one of the things I love to remind myself. Confusion is not a crime.
Oh, that's good.
You know, we have not been prepared to live a human life. It's like being an airplane pilot and trying to learn to fly midair. People do bad things because they're confused. Within their model of reality and life, they are acting appropriately, right? So somebody who feels very disempowered in life might feel powerful by contradicting something you say.
Yes.
That's the thing to do from their reality, right? But we love them anyways because, you know, what was your favorite shirt when you were 10 years old or 8 years old?
My dad got me this shirt that I thought was funny. I lived in Virginia at the time, and it said Virginia Brats on it. And Brats was an acronym for Born Rich and Totally Spoiled. Mind you, I was not born rich, but it was just funny.
What color was it?
It was like a turquoise.
Turquoise, Virginia Brats.
Yeah.
Now, would you wear that today if you're going into like an important meeting or anything like that?
No. In fact, I went and got fingerprinted last week too. And I was made sure I was not wearing what I normally wear because we've all been home. I've been in shorts and stuff. And we were going into like a government building. And I'm like, okay, I need to dress more seriously. I haven't dressed like this in over a year.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, here's the same way, but we can look back on that. And when you look back on that fashion, it was kind of cute at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was funny.
It was endearing, and it really worked well for the old you, didn't it?
Yeah.
In the same way, I would challenge you to look at the things you value, your worldview, what you think is important. There are, you know, you might look back and you might have thought, you know, in high school, it was all about how good am I at volleyball? That determines my worth as a human, right? Or, you know, you might think about what music do I listen to? That determines my worth as a human. You know, like if I'm not listening to this band, then people are going to think that I suck or whatever, right? Like in the same way, we need to look back on as we go through our learning journey with fashion, and the earlier phases are kind of cute and it's the best we could do at the time. That's how we need to look at people with their values. They value certain things that are kind of juvenile.
Yeah.
Right? Feeling powerful by contradicting people. Yeah, it's kind of childish. Okay. You'll grow out of it. It's cute. And maybe it works for you right now. It may not always. Right. So we kind of look at it like when people criticize, I just kind of laugh. I think that's cute. That's super cute. That's what they thought was the best thing to do. Right. Like,
yeah.
From their view of reality, this is the way to act, you know? And I believe this. All expressions of the individual are an expression of love, even if it's in a distorted form. Why are they trying to feel powerful and stuff? So they feel accepted. So they can get love and connection. At the end of the day, I just look at everything as a distortion of love. And then when I see that, it just helps me have greater patience for everybody.
That makes sense.
You know, even if they're trying to cow down other people to hype themselves up, at the end of the day, their objective is love deep down.
Yeah.
Right? And so I kind of look at it like that. I'm like, okay, I know that probably won't work out. I know that eventually they'll realize that in their own time. It's better they learn to realize it when it's their own idea because they'll be more committed to it than if I try to shake them out of that pattern too soon. So I'll give them their space because they will be more committed when they're like, I'm tired of living like this. This doesn't work. I'm tired of my Virginia Brats shirt with the turquoise. Boys just don't like me in this shirt. You know, they think it's misleading. I'm trying to pretend to be a rich girl and I'm not, you know, like in turquoise. I don't know what's with turquoise these days, right? So we want to just not take any of that stuff personal, right? Everybody wants only the best. You know, they're doing the best they can at any given moment. I think another thing is this, you know, well, we could do I go, you go. Do you have any other advice on improving sensitivity to overcome hurt feelings?
Well, I think what you said is a good point. I mean, understanding the other person and where they come from. And I will say, that's something I've always had a sensitivity towards other people and understanding why they behave a certain way, even if it's not the best behavior. And I
Mhm.
will say, from other people's perspective, that's a bad thing that I do. And so I'm curious as to your take on it. But they translate that as into me making excuses for other people. And I don't intend it as an excuse. It helps me understand where they're at. That doesn't mean the behavior is right, but I can understand how it happens. And that's kind of how I translate it. But other people don't seem to understand it the same way I do.
Yeah, I guess the blurry line there is between compassion and enabling.
Yes.
And I think it's important to just be clear that I'm showing these people compassion. I'm certainly not going to enable this pattern, right? But I can show
Right.
compassion. And I think there's a big difference there, you know? And for you, how might you be clear on the fact that you're being compassionate and not enabling?
I know that's something I'm struggling with right now. It's something that, I need to, uh, I need to feel, well, it's easy in some places in life and hard, like, and I don't mind sharing this, like, regards related to my divorce. My ex husband still hasn't gotten all of his stuff out of the house. And so I feel this sense of obligation. Like he wanted to borrow the vacuum cleaner because he's moving out of this apartment. And I feel like it's not necessarily my vacuum cleaner because we haven't really divided everything up because he hasn't taken everything that's his. And so I get kind of stuck in that place where, on one hand, I need to be putting pressure on him to get his stuff and finalize things and make it so I don't have to get in that situation. But on the other hand, I don't feel like I have total rights to things. So I get stuck in that blurry line and it's very complicated for me.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So you can always set some boundaries, healthy boundaries that are compassionate. Hey, we need to get some of these things out of here. So I understand you're busy. I understand you've got a lot on the go. So why don't we both chat and set a date by which to get some of these things out? Okay. Let's get very clear. And let's have a plan B. If you don't get them out by that date, what I'll do is I'll arrange to have them transferred to your place, like if need be, because I need to get things out of my place. Like I need to declutter around here, right? So we can always, then we're not enabling, but we're being compassionate. Just let me know if there's a problem with doing that right now, so I can cooperate with you and we can get along and work together, right? Because I want to be sensitive to your situation, but we need to move forward, right?
I like that. That's good.
So that could be a good way that we're not enabling, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're being compassionate. We're just saying, hey, here's the objective that's going to serve both our best interests. But let me know if let's collaborate, work together, and let me know. And then I usually like to put in, I think it's good to put in like a contingency. If you don't follow through on your end of the bargain by this date, here's how I respond. I think that's always good to just not enable people, because sometimes people just keep pushing deadlines,
Yes.
pushing it. If you don't get it out by this date, here's how I respond. I'm just going to pack up everything in boxes. I'm going to leave it somewhere, like whatever. Right. So just giving you a heads up that this is what I'm going to do. I'm being compassionate. I'm going to tell you in advance what I'm going to do if you don't follow through, because I'm not going to enable, but you're going to know.
Yeah.
So I think that could be a skill that you could develop, just like anything else.
Yes, I need that skill.
Perfect. Well, you know what? I mean, you have the 10 out of 10 potential to learn. You have the 10 out of 10 potential to be motivated. And yeah, so that it is completely within your realm of capabilities. So why don't you try and experiment with it? You let me know how it goes. And if it doesn't go so well, we could troubleshoot then.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I think another thing is, and that's a good little, sidebar on that. Absolutely. Love it. Great share. I think one of the things too we got to do is that we got to accept it, that we shouldn't live with the false expectation of better treatment. Criticism is a rite of passage on the journey to your highest potential. Okay. It really is. You're going to make a lot of friends and family jealous, who will criticize because They think when your successes are highlighted, it magnifies their flaws. You know, you're going to get mixed reactions to everything you say and do. You can't please everybody. Even Mother Teresa, Jesus, and Gandhi had haters. You know, it serves your glory to have enemies who are so unreasonable and unethical, you know? And you know you're not the ego, right? We know we're not this like false identity we throw out there in the world. So we should be grateful when others disparage and dishonor it. Otherwise, it'll just grow out of control. You know, it gives us an opportunity to just throw our ego out there.
That's
Right?
very true.
You know, and I'll give you an example. Like I was in I had a post go viral, a nature post, and it was feeding a Canadian goose, I believe. I had a goose start like necking my arm, like preening me, and then I started petting another one and I fed it. And then somebody wrote like the most negative comment, like, this is you're awful. Like feeding animals is like one of the worst things you can do. Like kind of like almost like that. I don't know exactly what he said, but it was kind of like a you're a terrible human kind of spirited, you know, like some people there's this weird like confused mindset where people hate when you feed wildlife. You know, it's like we can take away their habitat, we can slaughter them, kill them, mistreat them, but heaven forbid you feed a wild animal and show it some compassion when it comes up to you and it's hungry, right? So anyway, bunch of people attacked this guy, started criticizing him. He started criticizing them back, like, you're bullying. There was name calling. They were calling each other Karen, which I don't really know. I'm not really hip to that term. I guess it means like self-entitled, like you think your opinion's the best kind of thing. And they're all arguing over who's the bully and who's the Karen. And I'm just like, okay. So I'm like, I'm going to respond to this now. And then I said, you know, like, you know, lots of judgment going on here. Nothing but love and respect for all of you. If anyone deserves the title of bully and Karen and all this stuff, it's me. I will take all of it. Discussion settled, right? Like this. And just like boom, like dropping a bomb. I just threw my ego up, right? And then they all like followed me and like friended me, including the critic, right? The one who hated me is now like, and he liked my comments and stuff. And here's the thing, right? Now he liked the approach I took, but I'm actually in a position where I could potentially positively influence that person.
Mm-hmm.
If I negatively reacted and I said, okay, let's talk about how hypocritical you are. You know, have you ever bought dolphin safe tuna? Well, guess what? Dolphins died. It's a lie. You know, have you ever like, you know, animal habitat was destroyed for wherever you live. Like I could have easily, and I said, why are you talking about wildlife? Like, do you drive a car? Like 1.2 million people die a year because of car driving. Maybe you should focus on something more important. Like I could have ripped them apart on so many levels, but I'm like, no, that's what the ego would want. And the ego would grow big. And that's a hollow victory. I'm like, in this case, I'm just going to throw my ego up there and then potentially be able to be a positive influence. So, you know, accept it. Right. And then our truth is our truth. It's always correct. Your perspective on things is always original. There's never been another you. You're the only one. Feel free to share your truth. Nobody can argue with what your truth is. Nobody's qualified to judge. We shouldn't care about anyone's personal opinion or approval. You know, they don't know the full story of anything about you. Even like your parents probably think they know you super well. If somebody says, do you know Charmaine? Oh yeah, we know Charmaine. Well, did you know one time at a party, Charmaine like took too many Jello shots and started swinging off a chandelier? No, not our Charmaine. We know her. Like I'm not, and you know, obviously I'm joking around, but there's things about people who think they know you super well. There's things you probably said and done that would shock them. Like I didn't know Charmaine would act like that, right? Nobody really knows you that well. Nobody does.
No, but people assume, right? And that's what they do. Some of it they kind of normalize to who they are. They see things that are familiar and they start associating you with that.
Exactly. So the other thing is, you're never really being criticized. You're being contradicted. You're presenting one side of things, and then the contradiction has to show up. It's like the yin and the yang. Everything has to be contradicted. There's a correlation of opposites out there. We live in a dualistic reality. You must be contradicted on everything. Expect it and accept it. And never actually say somebody criticized me. Just say they contradicted me.
That's a
right?
good. And you know, I'm working with someone right now who's a contrarian. And so I know that quite well. But calling it contradicted is, it kind of shifts the meaning in your head, doesn't it?
It's more empowering language to use,
Yeah.
because criticized is kind of disempowering when we identify with that state.
Mm-hmm.
Contradicted is kind of more neutral.
Yeah.
And it really is truthful, because nobody is actually qualified to criticize you. They don't
That
know
makes
your reality, right? They don't know your
sense.
full story. How can they judge? You have to have a total idea of, you have to have the total picture before you can judge. Otherwise, it's just an arrogant opinion, right? So I think I'm big on having compassion for critics. I'm big on having compassion for them. They are held slave by their own painful emotions. People who lack wisdom, they imagine their ideas are their truth, you know? And when people act critical, it's a sign of lack of wisdom. And they deserve more compassion, not less. In the same way that you should have more compassion for a sick person, not less. Somebody's on their deathbed, you want to have more compassion for them. But if they're choosing literally like a deadly value that's just going to totally lead to spiritual and mental, emotional bankruptcy, you should actually have more compassion for them. Throw your ego up for them. Who cares? They stop taking ourselves so seriously.
Well, there's a lot of truth in that too. I know, especially since I was younger, I'm seeing such a shift in politics, for example. People attack and they name call in a way that I don't remember when I was younger. It used to be everybody could talk. You may not agree, but you felt like you would be heard and you could present your side. And now the attacks are so personal, people are just not talking. And what I don't think they understand is if you can't talk, you are never going to have an opportunity to bring someone over to your side. Because as long as you're attacking them, they're going to dig in their heels and hold to their beliefs even stronger. So there is some brilliance in, just like you were saying, laying your ego down so you can actually open up that door and maybe have that conversation. And who knows where it'll lead.
Yeah, and it's not even really all we might be doing is softening their heart so that somebody else can have that conversation. Now,
Yeah. You don't know what role you play.
We did a layup. Who cares? But at least at the end of the day, we can be happy with who we're being, because we're not claiming more self-importance.
Yeah.
We're not claiming excess self-importance. Like nobody should contradict me. See, I normally use the term contradiction in my head. I don't even use criticize. Like I try to use that relating to other people. I just call it contradiction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And somebody who acts like that is usually lacking in love. And love is the only wealth that truly matters. Therefore, they deserve our compassion, right? I'm willing to give it to them. I don't care, And I think mentally putting ourselves in their position, then we can have the utmost kindness to understand and actually truly help them. I think there's greater joy in that. I think that's more joyful than tearing them down.
Yeah, it is.
And I remember there was once a person who later it was kind of obvious. I was really overperforming at work and winning lots of awards, and they were hating on me and they were trash talking me behind my back all the time. And I wasn't used to that because I was always so nice to everybody. And I was actually really nice to this person right until the end. And then they ended up getting fired because, they ended up, just doing a lot of inappropriate things as they started to succumb to this ever deepening mental hell. But then as they got fired, they actually said to their client roster, they said the nicest, best things about me, and they sent me all of their best clients. They said, I got fired. You should go work with Brendan. And I ended up like setting company awards, I ended up breaking records on productivity because of this. And it was a handoff from my biggest critic. And now I'm friends with that person. Like we chat on like Facebook and stuff, and we get along. And the whole time, I never let it get to me, because I actually looked at them and I saw their highest potential. And I'm like, I know they're not living it, but I know deep within them, there's a strong heart in there, and they just want to be successful, and they don't know any other way, and they don't know how to handle these emotions and feelings right now. Right? But that's the ultimate victory. Just turn your critic into a friend. Ultimate victory. I think a lot of times criticism is a preliminary step to acceptance. People are trying to test you. They're trying to see how they respond to you before they buy into you, right? They're not sure you're for real.
And
right?
So they push.
Yeah, they're not sure. So when they oppose you, it's because they want to know you're for real. They don't want to be misled, right? They're like, can anyone truly be like this? I don't think so, right? Like, they might really like what you and your ideas represent, but they're afraid to be led astray. And they're afraid to look like a fool in the end. So they might develop a like for you over time. But right now, their preliminary step to accepting you is to contradict you and see how you respond. Right? Can you pass the test? Can you know that there's token criticism you're going to get as people come to accept you? That can help us accept it more, knowing that this is token criticism before acceptance, right?
Testing. Well, and you and I both talked about watching Tony Robbins' love and relationship videos and talking about how women test. It's that same kind of thing. Women aren't looking for men to fail. They're, challenging them in a way and wanting them to step up and wanting them to succeed.
Yeah. And then I think another thing is just remembering at the end of the day, what do we want our mission to be here? Do we want to be a cause or an effect? If you want to be a cause in this world, you have to rise above the likes and dislikes of other people. And you got to be able to think of others, lead by example. Praise doesn't make you any better and blame doesn't make you any worse. That's a fact, right? Like, let's demonstrate patience, understanding, loving acceptance. Like at the end of the day, in the banquet of the ultimate reality, we're not going to celebrate who had the biggest home, the biggest car, the nicest clothes. We're going to celebrate who succeeded at the art and science of being a human being and what mattered most. And really, it's demonstrating and being a living example of virtue rather than vice. Yeah. Because that is what frees us from suffering. So at the end of the day, it's these kind of opportunities that matter most, and you can help people if they're open and willing. Otherwise, I have a two-step system. It's this: I either, help you or I love you unconditionally. And that's it. That's it. One of the two, And in many ways, if we just love somebody unconditionally, like love is the most healing force on the planet, I think that might be better than the help we wanted to give people, rather than like trying to correct their perspective and get them to see things your way, right? So let's talk about how to respond to criticism. Did you have any other ideas you want to throw out on, how to improve sensitivity and overcome our hurt feelings?
Oh, not right now.
Okay, we covered a lot.
Yeah.
We got to do a really good job for the team. 2-person team crushing criticism escapism today. So we got to come up with a lot of ideas. Okay. How to respond to criticism. Let's talk about the best way to respond to it. If you were to come up with like a formula, like what might it be right now? Like you can share some ideas and then I'll share some ideas.
Well, like I said, for me right now, I try to not respond immediately. Like I try to actually hold back from responding and try to take in what they're saying. And I may have to talk myself through it. I do a lot of self-talk, like I was saying. And sometimes that's hard in the moment, especially if, they're the kind of person who, if you're not saying anything, they just keep coming. I don't know if that helps in that case, but sure. For me, I need to take a step back and I need to, and I'm not someone who, I don't tend to respond harshly, but I can be dismissive. That's where I tend to go.
Okay, cool. So I kind of have like a 4-step system. I'll be like, pause, center yourself. So you might center yourself with self-talk. Somebody might place their hands over their heart, take a couple deep breaths, get out of that reactive state, like dissolve your triggers. Just whatever you got to do to get into that centered state, right? We don't want to be in a lowered state because we're not going to respond favorably. And this is a test. Forgive them right away. They're doing the best they can with what they know. When people know better, they do better. I remind myself of this, right? Then I ask myself, number 2, can I learn from it? How does their perspective serve me? Even if they're wrong, they give me insights into how other people think. oh, when I say this, people interpret it this way. I never anticipated that, but now I am aware of that truth. And therefore, I'm more empowered. I'm wiser, right? Can I find any flaw in there that they're talking about? How can I correct myself? Maybe they're pointing out an opportunity. So that's number 2. Can I learn from it? Number 3, is it worthy of a response? Why or why not? Is it a good or bad time to object? What do I have to gain or lose? I think we should really think about that. Like, is it worthy of a response? And then what type of response is best? Should I just ignore and dismiss it? Should I reply with a compassionate response? That's usually my default. Or do I have to reply with a stern response? When something important's on the line or you're cornered, you might have to respond with a stern response. So I kind of break it down strategically like a chess match. What are we going to do here? We're going to ignore that move. We're going to go like a little bit compassionate and gentle. We're going to go stern. Just go for the checkmate, right? Now, and I think for ignoring it, like we might want to ignore it with like, there's never compete with someone who has nothing to lose, right? Just some people enjoy evil for amusement. They're going to say and do things for their own amusements. Somebody who calls you a devil is being used by the devil, right?
And they get fuel out of a response. That's when you don't want to respond.
Yeah. If you refuse to fight, who can fight with you? And one of the things I like, Yogananda once said this in The Divine Romance, and I made a note of this, even if such a person goes a step further and slaps you and you do not respond, that slap will burn in their palm throughout their life. But if you fight back, they'll only want to strike you 12 times harder. Right?
Yeah.
So, it helps to just kind of behold some of them as little children. They don't know what they're doing. If you conquer them in an argument, once they've risen again, they'll try to destroy you. And then nobody truly wins. So I think in some of these situations, we might want to consider ignoring them. Now, if we're going to respond to it, like, I think there's kind of like, I think sometimes there's a difference between feedback and criticism. Okay. Do you know what the difference is between feedback and criticism?
Intent?
Yeah. Brilliant. What's the intent with feedback?
To be helpful.
Exactly. Yes, you nailed it. So sometimes people give us feedback and we respond like we're being criticized. Right?
Yeah.
So if it's, and not everybody's great with their feedback. I have a whole form on how to give feedback so that when I do it, it goes over smooth. But I find most people, if I was to score them on their form and feedback, most people suck. It's like just going to the gym and lifting weights instinctively. Like your form, you're not going to get it right. You're going to create aches and pains. You're not going to get good results. People need to realize there's an art to delivering feedback. Now, when we're receiving feedback, right? So anyway, if we're going to respond to feedback, I like to think of it as a test every time you get feedback, and we get tested without warning. And we want to make sure we handle it with good form and precision. Remember, you're a high effort learner. You're a work in progress. This is a part of the process to come into your highest potential. You're supposed to make mistakes as you learn, as you go, so you can learn from them, right? So you're going to get 3 types of feedback. One is a gentle suggestion for improvement. It's kind of obvious. 2 is a reprimand. People might give you a reprimand to get your attention, and then another form of feedback. Can you guess what the next one is?
I don't know.
Okay. I'll tell you what it is. It's disregard, rejection, or withdrawal of attention.
Oh,
form of feedback.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
Yeah.
And that often happens if you've attacked the feedback source. And it really requires increased effort on your part to work your way back into it. So,
well, that's what I alluded to earlier, right? Where you might hesitate to have a conversation with somebody because in the past it hasn't gone well and they haven't received it well. So yeah, you're right.
So you're giving them feedback by dismissing them now, right?
You hesitate, yeah. You don't want to
That's
go there
approach,
again.
yeah. So I think one thing is this: somebody gives us feedback, if they're intending to help, whether it's criticism or feedback, if it seems like they're intending to help, thank them and show consideration. Say, thanks for sharing that perspective. Maybe you're right. I'll take that into consideration. What's wrong with doing that? I think that's good. You're not saying you're going to follow it. Or you might say, thank you for sharing. It's very helpful. I never thought of that before. I'll consider that. Show that you're going to consider it. That disarms them. That's their intention, right? Make sure you understand it is step 2. Repeat back to them what you think they're trying to say, or ask further clarifying questions. You might be like, let me get this straight. You think if I was to do X, Y, Z, it would give me X, Y, Z result, correct? Or I might say to them, if you're cool with it, I'd like to ask clarifying questions to help me define practical steps towards improvement. Or you might say, look, let me know all the ways you'd like me to take this into consideration. I'm happy to amend the process in any way that makes things better. So you might say something like that. All of those are like music to somebody's ears, because then it's showing like you're actually like taking it serious, right? Now they're not going to feel like they have to reprimand and attack you to get your attention.
True. That would help make their delivery gentler because they feel like they're being received.
Yes. I love the way that you articulated that. And then invite more feedback in future. I just say, hey, don't hesitate if there's ever other opportunities for improvement. We can address. Feedback is also always welcome and appreciated. Let me know if there's anything left unsaid I could take into consideration, and then basically like have the attitude that you should be glad when you find a fault in yourself. It's been there the whole time. Now you can do something about it. We shouldn't try to defend ourselves. What are we here for? We're not here to defend how we are. We're here to get better. Be grateful when somebody points out a flaw. Let's pretend it's all your fault and take extreme responsibility. It's always an invitation to growth, criticism, and feedback. Right? I treat feedback as sacred instruction designed for our soul progress, the only progress that really matters. It doesn't come from other people. It comes from the universe through other people. We need help. We need reality checks to see our hidden faults. So that's kind of some of the things to consider, right?
Yeah.
So, we want to just be able to, now, if it's somewhat of criticism, you could respond using the same stuff to criticism, right? It's a very gentle, compassionate response. You can accept it, right? Just be like, just know that anger and retaliation can't reform these people. Like only like unconditional acceptance and love can really kind of slowly soften them, and just recognize this is a test for you to express that higher version of yourself, respect them on their strength of spirit. Now, if you need to present a counter argument, I say do it in a gentle way, but you got to discern what's worth engaging with. You can say, in my experience, I have found that blank leads to blank. You're sharing your truth. Your truth is always correct. You could always say, it's an established fact that blank. If you say it's an established fact, it sounds very powerful, right? I've done my homework and what I've found is blank, right? Also, very powerful to say. Do you have any ideas on how we might present counter arguments in a very gentle way?
Well, not only saying something like that, but can't you ask them for their feedback on it then? In the past, I've always found this to be true. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great, and I think, if you had to, you might even say, has your conclusion met a reasonable standard of evidence? I'm just wondering if you've considered the context, if like all the full story behind this situation, to really be qualified to make a judgment call here, or are you just speculating? Because I think sometimes you might have to call people out. Most criticisms are just speculation. They're speculating. They're making a lot of assumptions, right? So
Yeah.
those are some different ways to kind of frame a counter argument. I always think it's best to just do this stuff in email. Gives you more time to think and plan, right?
That's very true.
Like anything, you put an apology, responding to criticism. Oh, everything's best in email, right? Because people always hear things different after the fact. You say something and they totally twisted what you said, and it's like, I didn't say that at all. And then they think you're trying to manipulate them. No, now you're trying to manipulate my words. I know what I heard. Great. Now I got to convince you of your own,
Theory.
I think it's good to admit fault when we can and be humble. I could say, I was one of these people who did these kinds of things, right? Truthfully, I've been guilty of a lot, so we can just kind of like throw our ego out there.
Do you find when you admit fault, other people tend to do that in response as well?
Not as much as you might think.
Oh, really?
You'd think they would. What they typically do is they soften their next approach, right? Because I will admit a fault that they are clearly demonstrating. And very rare, they're in too much of a position of wanting to look right rather than wanting to do the right thing. So in my experience, not so much. I wouldn't really be in this point of a strategic conversation with people in my life that are very reasonable. So if I'm dealing with a reasonable person, usually we don't get to this point. And if I did, I imagine they would respond and they'd reciprocate. But usually we're dealing with an irrational person at this point,
True. I do have people that do reciprocate, but they are not irrational, like you said.
Yeah, I'm talking about, you're dealing with the most irrational people. You're going to find that they don't tend to reciprocate.
Well, and I've dealt with narcissists, and sometimes the victory has to be that, you let them have the win and you made that choice, you let them feel like they won. Mm-hmm. So that's one of those situations where the argument just isn't worth it. And like we were saying before, sometimes talking back gives them fuel. So sometimes it's easiest just to exit that conversation.
Yeah. So I think that's a lot of stuff to just keep in mind there. And then I always close with goodwill and humility. Like, look, I'm just going to keep learning and growing here, sending positive vibes to you, right? Like anything like that, comment. So that's some of the ways that I've used to articulate some of those gentle responses. Okay. Now, if you're in a corrective debate, we got to level it up, right? So if you're in a corrective debate, and you're cornered, you're going to have to be a little bit more, you're going to have to have a little bit more of an assertive approach. So if you're cornered, there's something meaningful at stake, you need to win a debate, it's obvious they're not going to go away quiet. You might need to address a false accusation. Okay. Have you ever been falsely accused of something?
Sure.
Yeah. Falsely accused of intent, like your intent behind a thought or an action or anything. We all have.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of we can't be gentle with this. Right?
Yeah.
So I might say this, would you consider yourself a responsible intellectual? Because if so, please consider studying the facts first before trying to help, or it just increases confusion. Right? That's the, intellectually sophisticated thing to do. That challenges them. What makes you believe that what makes you believe your conclusions have met a reasonable standard of evidence? Did you get the full story? Are the sources of evidence credible and non-biased? So this is some of the things we might want to say. I got falsely accused of recruiting an employee to work for my company that I had nothing to do with. And there was a big false accusation, and it was gonna lead to the removal of one of the biggest clients we have for an education company I'm a part of. It was a false accusation, completely false. I challenged the evidence. I said, there's not good evidence here. There's no evidence. And anything that's there is just rumor, right? I had to challenge it on the basis, like, this is not true. It's also not indicative of historical precedent. It's also completely unwise in every level. I have the intelligence not to do this and compromise a conflict of interest here for what little is to be gained by hiring an employee. Like I had to actually craft a big response to challenge these false accusations, right? You know, so, but you have to be strategic with it. You know, sometimes people will hint or insinuate something negative, okay? Like they might say this. They might say, well, Charmaine's husband and her got a divorce. Then somebody might say, well, what did Charmaine do? And they might say, well, if you only knew what she did, that's insinuating something horrible, right? So we can't like, we might say, hold on, stop right there. You're insinuating, give me specific clarity. Give me specific clarity on this. You're not getting away with that. Insinuating you're doing us all a favor by hiding some like terrible reality. Force the clarity. Don't let them sidestep. Be precise. Tell me exactly who, what, where, and when with this something horrible. You know, are you exaggerating? Are you distorting things? This is a cheap alternative to intellectual responsibility. You know, so you don't want to let anyone get away with insinuating something negative about you. Right?
Yeah.
So you have to call that out, right? Because that's a very manipulative way people will do that. And then they'll hide, they'll be like, well, you know, there was a couple times she left the dirty dishes out. No, let's expose you for exaggerating here and taking things out of context. Now, sometimes people make a false statement or a declaration, right? A false statement or a declaration. How might you respond to a false statement or declaration?
Something that's just not true.
Yeah. If somebody criticizes on something that's just not true.
I mean, you can ask for evidence, right? I mean, if they're only saying it.
Perfect. And how might you ask for evidence? How would you articulate it what would be a good way to articulate that request?
Aside from asking for proof, what proof do you have that this happened, or what proof do you have that what you say is true?
Yeah. So we want to get proof. Now, I'm a fan of just being very gentle with that, because when we say, where's the proof? People who are hiding proof get vicious.
Yeah.
If they're hiding something, they will get vicious on that comment. But I'll say, look, I thought otherwise, but I might be wrong. I frequently am. And if I'm wrong, I want to be put right. So let's examine the facts. That's such a gentle, disarming way to say. And then if somebody overreacts to that, they're not likely to get triggered. If we say, where's the proof? They might get like wound up and triggered. They might consider that combative.
Okay,
this sounds very cooperative, but it's also kind of throwing the ego up.
Mm-hmm.
And then if somebody doesn't respond well to a statement like that, they look bad. They just look bad.
Yes.
It's a good checkmate move, right? If that was too much, you could always say this. You could always say, tell me why you think that's true. That doesn't make them feel as cornered as where's the proof. So many people say so many things they don't have any proof for.
Yeah.
Be like, where's the proof of anything? You know, where's the proof that the earth is round instead of flat? You know, like where's the proof on this? Where's your proof on what, on that? They start challenging you back, right? Tell me why you think that's true. You know, I want to know, do you have verified knowledge, or is this just a lot of imagination? Is all the evidence, is this the undeniable truth, or a bunch of not yet proven assumptions? You know, can new evidence emerge that overturns this conclusion? Those are very powerful things to bring up. Because somebody could say, look, science says this, and I'd say, look, science isn't a finished product. All the evidence isn't in, or a study could come in any day. Science used to say smoking was good for you. Science used to say that coffee would give you cancer, you know? Then they did a new study and they showed that once you remove the cigarette smokers from the tested population, no, coffee helps you live longer. It's just a matter of fact that all the smokers drink coffee, right? So it skewed the data. So science used to say nuts were bad for you. They're high fat. Now science is saying they're good fat. I don't care what science says. Science isn't finished yet. It's a work in progress. So if somebody tries to throw scientific fact at me, I'd be like, science doesn't even claim to have the undeniable truth. Most studies end with further research is needed.
Always.
So don't take science out of context here, right? Like, so I think, you know, if you declare opinions as indisputable fact, you're adding to mass confusion, right? Like, so we don't want to accept this, you know, and I could just say, I don't accept this in the least. You know, like the opinion is based on a very limited frame of reference, right? And don't confuse personal anecdote with data. You know, applications of a principle are not the same as the principle itself. Any more than a ray of sunlight piercing the clouds is the same thing as sun itself. It's a limited expression of an actual principle. That's, you know, I try to avoid talking that nerdy. So to be honest, I wouldn't normally talk like that. If I'm dealing with some sort of a wordy intellectual, I might use terms like that, right? But a lot of people have blind arrogance. It's the pattern of assuming that their opinions are fact and lying to themselves to maintain, you know, to be convinced it's truth. So, you know, we just got to be like, tell me why you think that's true. Let's pull the veil. You know, what makes you so sure your opinion's a fact? Like all these different things. Okay. So, that's challenging things that are blatantly wrong. Now, what about challenging intention and delivery? How might we challenge intention and delivery?
I tend to be direct. I'm not sure that's always the best.
Tell me what you do. Tell me what you do now, and then I'll explore some different options, and maybe you change what you do, and maybe you don't. Maybe you like how you do handle things, right? Who knows?
Well, and you know, I've got limited experience with people that I have conflict with, you know. So, you know, my ex-husband was a big source of that. So I learned what works with him, which isn't necessarily what I need to do with other people. But one thing I used to say to him a lot was, just because you say something doesn't make it true. Because he would, that's how he would handle things, you know. He would say things and try and make it truth. And instead of arguing, I would just kind of lay that out there and leave it. But, you know, his intent was always, it was to make himself feel better or to minimize him having to look at himself, you know. So I knew that's where it was coming from. And he would attack me for whatever he was guilty of.
Yeah. So that's funny. I mean, I might say something like this. You know, I might say, you know, do you want to get to the truth of the matter, or are you just interested in being right? Now, when I say that, usually people will go quiet, and that's the last you hear of them. Like
it's probably true.
You got him, checkmate, right?
Yeah.
You know, but I might say something like, if you deliver your message in this way, I can't take you seriously because you're not taking yourself seriously. You know, when people communicate like this, it doesn't go over well.
Yeah.
You know, so I might say something like that. I'm training them how to treat me. I'm saying, I'm not going to take you seriously until you take your communication seriously. Right?
Yeah, completely. Well, and that was one of the issues. I had issues with lying, you know, with being lied to. And so that was the thing, you know, I could appreciate some of what was being said, but I can't take the conversation seriously because I can't trust because you've lied to me. I can't trust what you're saying now, you know.
Yeah, so you could just say, I can't you take you serious until you take yourself serious.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I might even challenge them. I might challenge them to challenge their own position. I might say, in the name of fairness, can you also acknowledge and speak to the downsides of your position here? Right? Like, let's say somebody's like, we need to be skeptical here, blah, blah, blah. I say, can you at least, to be fair and balanced, why should we be critical of being skeptical? Does skepticism lead to truth? Does skepticism lead to happiness? Are people, when they totally pledge allegiance to skepticism, are they truly at peace and happy within their soul? I challenge them to challenge their own position. No, I'm not dealing with skepticism here. Like, come on.
Let them do the work.
And I'd say, if you're not interested in at least addressing the downsides of skepticism, then I can't take you serious. Because you're not taking yourself serious. Because you're not even willing to admit this whole other half of the reality of your position. If they're truly trying to help, I might say, are you truly trying to help? Because if so, authentic help should be backed by due diligence, research, facts, and other efforts to understand the story fully. Otherwise, it's not helpful and it just increases the confusion and doubt. Also, it should be done with a spirit of cooperation, not condensation.
Yeah.
When you belittle others or make them feel dumb, they're less likely to follow your advice out of spite. If you truly want to help, be nice. Be nice, and people will receive your message. So, I mean, this is a corrective debate. Do I have to talk like this to people often? No. But if I, most of the time I just let them suffer, to be honest. I'm just going to let that one suffer. Do I want to break them out of the spell yet? No, they gotta get familiar with this, right? If you break them out before they're ready, they don't get all the valuable lessons of how much this sucks, right? How ineffective this is. Okay, so those are some different things to challenge them. And I might say, remember that context matters. So I might just say, look, all right, context matters. How is this context inappropriate? Are you exaggerating? Are you generalizing? Is there still time for change? Is there still more of the story to know? If we don't consider context, we close off compassionate understanding. So you can call them out on that. You're closing off compassion and understanding. You totally disregarded the context of this situation. So that's something else. I might show the hypocrisy of their statement when applied to a broader context. So somebody was like, blah, blah, blah. Raccoons can get into your attic and tear things apart. And somebody said this to me. And I was like, well, look, do you keep knives in your kitchen? Because, knives have been used in stabbings and murders. We all take calculated risks. I'll respect you on yours if you respect me on mine. Right? Like, I can't have somebody criticizing me on a calculated risk. Do you drive an automobile? That's way riskier than befriending a little trash panda. Yeah, I'm friends with a trash panda. Who cares? So I actually have really enjoyed the process of, and I don't know what it is, whether it's just spiritual destiny or whatever. The animal encounters I've had with wildlife have been very unusual, but I haven't been the one to create them. They've just happened to me. And
It happened for you.
yeah, exactly. And I was never looking for it. I was never anticipating or trying to make it happen. But it's coming with all of these lessons. So we're gonna on criticism. All right. We are infinitely better now that we're joined with Jen Ventura. Jen Ventura in the house, talking about challenging criticism, right? So I guess we're kind of finishing up on discussing like how we can really best navigate a corrective debate, showing the hypocrisy of their statement when applied to a broader context. Like if somebody says you did something stupid, it's risky, you could say, look, do you drive a car? Like over 1.2 million people die a year in automobile accidents. Jordan Peterson, I once said, he was making an argument. It was very controversial. I'm not saying I agree with what he did, but he was applying context because he's very controversial for this. He was saying women want equality, but there's more men in prison. Do you want to equalize that? More men commit suicide. Do you want to equalize that? More men live on the street. Do you want to equalize that? So he was able to kind of take that and apply it to a broader context. And it definitely was effective in his debate, regardless of what's actually true and whatever. But, context matters, and we can challenge the context, right? Mm-hmm. We could also just shift the focus to real world results. People would criticize Tony Robbins for not having a PhD, and he would say, I have a PhD in results. So in your defense, you can always speak to the positive results you get, right? Like I know with the system, the exercise therapy system, nobody can really criticize me because I'd be like, you're lying in the face of stacks of testimonials and evidence. Mm-hmm. All these people can't be lying. I'd be out of business if this stuff didn't work. I built my whole career on this. So nobody can really criticize it on that basis, right? So I could be like, yeah, there isn't studies out there, but there isn't studies on many things. If we want to wait for the studies, it won't be in my lifetime. We need action now, right? So sometimes we don't have that luxury, So if somebody says, where's the scientific conclusions for what you're saying? Science doesn't deliver the absolute and undeniable truth. The consensus can be disrupted by an emergence of new evidence or a discovery of the flaw in the data. Research consensus is subject to change and revision. Therefore, the present consensus is a not yet proven assumption made by men and women who make mistakes. So there's a lot of things to consider here if we want to challenge people on stuff like that, right? And if somebody isn't using science, we can be like, well, who are you accountable to in your conclusions? If you haven't been verified by an academic institution, who are you accountable to? So we can challenge people on the other side of the fence, mm-hmm. Right? So those are some different things. Now, next point, maybe we should discuss how to give people feedback. So sometimes, and I think this is funny because I think criticism is unasked for advice. Right? Think about that. We give people that advice without them asking for it. We're sending the message that they're not good enough. They're not doing their life right. We haven't really asked permission first. So it comes off condescending, So criticism can be unasked for advice. Now, what is the best way to give people feedback? Who has any thoughts on the best way to give people helpful advice without coming off negative? What are your thoughts? Just where you're at currently with things. Any thoughts?
You could always ask them. I mean, just say, I kind of have a different perspective on this. Would you be interested in hearing it?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. And if you said that to me, I'm always going to say yes. Of course, I respect you. I want to hear your perspective. And I like that you use the word perspective. It's so key that you did that because then you're not making people defensive.
Yes, it's my view.
Yeah, it's so disarming and it's gentle and it's inviting. Jen, any thoughts? Or you can say pass if you want to say pass.
It was actually like, yeah, asking first. I also think that appreciating, well, thank you for sharing that, first, to make sure that there's no threat, and that can also be like quite vulnerable for someone to share, and then to then follow up with asking, I have a different perspective. Would you like to hear it? Yeah, that's great. I don't know if there's anything else.
Yeah.
Me.
Now I would say, the way I might do it is this. I might say, I want to have a conversation in which the intent is to better understand each other so we can better help each other. Would you be okay with that? I'm not making it about them. Right? Even though I'm going to give feedback, right? I'm going to make it about understanding them. Maybe there's some things that I don't understand, right? So that's a very easy, like, it's hard to say no to that.
Well, you're also setting your intent so they know what your intent is.
Yeah, we're showing goodwill. Then I might say this, have you ever noticed that when we're not at our best, let's say it's somebody who gets into bad moods, okay? Let's take that as an example. It's very general. I'm not speaking about a situation specific in my life or anything, but we all know people who do this. They get in bad moods, they make it suck for everybody, right? So here's how I might go into this. Have you ever noticed how when we're not at our best, we sometimes create injustices on those people around us? For example, when we're lazy in our work ethics, we let down those who are depending on us. When we're in a bad mood, we take it out on those around us. People have mood swings, have a difficult time maintaining relationship harmony. Have you ever noticed that? So I might say that, right? I'm just saying, have you noticed this? I'm not even saying anything about them yet. Then I might say this. Are you interested in being your best self and staying true to what you believe in? People might say no. And if you dig deep, you'll find that if somebody doesn't want to do this, it's because they think it's a lot of work. But then I might highlight, it's a lot of work to not do this. Imagine having a life where you have no self-regulation of your thinking. Imagine, getting pissed off and grumpy all the time and getting triggered and tossed around like a leaf blowing in the wind. That's exhausting. That's a struggle. That's a lot of work. You don't have to do work either way. You might as well get a reward for it, right? Now, if I have to, I might say that. And that's kind of a good sell. Like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to help you connect the dots. You're going to suffer. You can take that road. You're going to suffer, and it is going to be work. There's no easy way out. If you've pledged allegiance to moodiness. So I might say that, right? Then I might say something like, would you want to know if you had an opportunity to improve and be your best self? Would you want to know? If you had that, would you want to know? Right? And then I'd say, would you like me to help you with that? And then I would say, after all, we all have hidden faults and we need other people to help us find them if we want to have a hope at fixing them. Everybody needs reality checks. Right? And if not, if you don't want to know, that's fine. But I need to know you feel that way so I can respond accordingly. I need to know so I can respond accordingly. And then I might kind of hint that, furthermore, you might want to consider how your wrong judgments on how you think and behave will betray you in the end. And I'm just saying, I wonder when you're going to figure that out. Like, that gets into somebody's head. Like, when you make a comment like that, they can't block it out. They'll be sitting there at night in their bed, twiddling their thumbs, looking at the ceiling like, what the hell did he mean by that? Damn him. You know, like, it's a comment that just gets into your head. You know, and I might say, what you don't know can hurt you. Right? Now, so if somebody says, yes, I want to know about the opportunities to be better, then I might say this. In that case, are you cool with me speaking freely? Even though it might be a little bit uncomfortable, it will ultimately serve your best interests. Okay? I've never had anyone say no to that one. I've had people say no to, do you want to know the opportunity to be a better self? And usually it had to do with low self-efficacy. They didn't believe in themselves yet. So we just had to shift our focus, right? They just believed it meant inevitable failure. I don't want to work on improving myself. Nothing ever works out. So it was fine. We just had to shift directions. But now you have permission to have an uncomfortable conversation. You notice, like, that was really like 4 or 5 steps that brought me to that point. And then now I might be like this. What do you stand for? What are your highest principles? And here's where I want to highlight the values that they might have contradicted. I might say, you know, do you believe in the value of hard work rather than doing things with a half-hearted effort? Do you believe in that? Do you believe we should be willing to pay the price for success rather than looking for the easy way out? Or looking for an easy way out, right? Do you believe in dependable teamwork rather than making careless mistakes that affect others? Do you believe in that? Is that a value for you? You know, do you believe in justice, that we should be fair and considerate of others rather than imposing unnecessary injustices on them? Once again, this is bad moods, right? So I'm going to highlight for them how bad moods are actually violating that principle. You know, I'm going to help them connect the dots on that, right? You know, do you believe in extreme ownership rather than blaming outside circumstances and other people? You know, do you believe in promoting peace and happiness rather than promoting negativity? You know, do you believe in a spirit of cooperation rather than a spirit of combativeness? Like, I might just be trying to highlight whatever it is that I want to call them out on by actually getting them to pledge their allegiance to a principle. So then I might say, first of all, I want to talk to you about this behavior with the moodiness. Okay. Well, I'm just going to highlight the behavior. And then I say this. First of all, this is nothing. I've done far worse than this before. Okay. Personally, I've personally done far worse than this before. We're all just doing the best we can with what we know. You know? And when we know better, we do better. And I might give a personal example. What does that do? I'm throwing my ego out there. I'm not trying to condescend them. I'm going to throw out a story. I'd be like, look, one time I got in a bad mood. Let me tell you about this. Man, this was horrible. I said and did this stupid thing. And did I ever regret it? You know, like, whew, it did not work out. You know, it was an experiment. Failed, right? I look back and I'm like, man, I wish somebody called me out. You know? So then I might say, I might just try to say, you know, let's discuss how this behavior potentially violated your highest principles. You stand for justice and consideration of others, but how is this imposing an injustice on others? Like, did you make it stink for everybody else when you brought your bad mood into the room? Were you kind of, you know, you like a spirit of cooperation, you stand for that value? But were you being cooperative when you took your bad mood out on other people? Right? Like, you believe we should be willing to pay the price for success, but is your bad mood suggesting you don't want to do the work necessary in order to get what you want here? You're kind of bitter and resentful, right? So if I miss if they miss anything, I might say, well, here's how I see it. And I help them grasp the context of it. So I'm basically going over the values and comparing it to their actions. You know, and I might say, you know, did you know that when you choose these behaviors, other people can see it for what it is? Other people can see it for what it is, right? So then I might go into, is this the type of person you're committed to being? You know, like if you want to be like that, that's fine, but we all need to know, right? We need to know you're going to be like that, because there's times when we're going to need to create some healthy boundaries around this stuff. You know, we don't have to honor you when you're bringing an ugly mood. We can just do what a dog does and leave you alone, right? We don't have to honor you when you're being like this. We don't have to give you the time of day, because you're not being you. You're better than this. I'm not going to honor you when you're not being you, because that's where they're going to try to blast you. They're going to try to feel like you're dishonoring them by not accepting them when they're trying to bring a stinky mood in. That's what stinky mood people do. They feel like you're supposed to get angry and everyone has to respect you. Express your feelings. I'm expressing myself. It's like, no. That's like expressing yourself by pooping your pants. You're expressing yourself. It's natural. It's your default thing to do. That doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. You know, express your higher self, you know? So I might go into, how are you so much better than this? How are you capable of so much more? What is your highest potential here, really? Right? You know, and then I might say, you know, so if you decided to take your life to the next level, what would you try next? What would you do next time? So that would be kind of like the process I would take somebody through, rather than just blatantly criticizing them. But it's like hand-holding them step by step by step. I'm making sure they grasp the context. Because if you try to correct somebody, they're still not even aware that they're violating their highest principles. I'm helping them grasp the context of cause and effect. So it only makes things worse, right? That this is not who you want to be. So I got to do that, and I got to be gentle in doing that, because I have to truly authentically like not want to be cowing them down here, honoring them that they're doing the best they can with what they know. There's an animal in my backyard making noise. I'm not sure what it is. It's a skunk or a raccoon. But all right. Any thoughts on giving feedback? And using a process like that?
I think, I don't know, just listening to it, I think it can be, it's still a difficult thing to have that conversation with somebody and to have them feel like they can succeed.
I think tone would also
Yeah.
be a really great thing to consider, like the tone of voice.
Well, and I think having an established relationship too. It's one thing in a relationship where, like, if they highly respect you and you're having this conversation with them, that's a very different situation than somebody maybe you don't have that kind of relationship with.
Yeah, those are great points. So preliminary, consider having a good tone, establish trust, right? Then, you know, I think establish intent is good. Intent of wanting to help, wanting to understand. And I think wanting to understand is important, because here's the thing. You might be like, look, I want to understand you better. But then you might find out that they just their whole life fell apart. Well, okay, well, maybe your bad mood here, maybe we can have some compassion for you, right? You know, I can have some compassion for you right now. We just thought you were being inconsiderate. You know, if your whole life fell apart and you don't know how to handle it, you're overwhelmed, of course, we can't fault you on that. How can we help you now that we understand you better?
I was just going to bring that up, like, you know, to really inquire and to ask, like, how would you like to be supported? I don't know if that really plays in here.
That's a good question, though, because I think a lot of times people act habitually and they don't realize that the choices they're making aren't in alignment with what they believe. It's just their habit that they're in. Once you've kind of brought it into their mind, then they're making a choice each time. That doesn't mean just because they're aware, they'll suddenly start choosing correctly. And so even if they decide they want to make these changes, they still may fail. And so asking how they can be supported, even if it's not a situation where something bad's going on in their life, how they can be supported in, continuing to make the adjustments in their life to choose better. It's still a good question to ask.
Yeah, so we might say in this case, yeah, can you help me understand the reason and intent for you choosing that behavior so that I might better support you, you know? And I think that's fair. They might just say, well, look, I was tired, I was lazy. I'd be like, okay, well, what outcomes did you want? What outcomes did you want? Okay. Is it possible there's a better way to get what you want? Are you willing to explore that? We might say a couple things like that, and it's very open and it's inviting, and here's the thing. At the end of the day, we're all in this group project called humanity, trying to figure out what the heck we're doing and what the heck we're supposed to do. We need to help each other. I think it's important not to judge people, but to try to relate to their reality. Like what's going on, everything they do is the best thing to do at that time. It's the best idea. So sometimes we need to help each other in the same way that we've been helped, gently, almost with the attitude of a concerned parent, right? Like if we have a tone, like when I'm coaching, I try to use I have almost like a concerned parent tone with clients many times, because that's kind of the attitude I'm in. It's kind of like, we care and we're trying to just help walk people through it, but it's not really judging. It's kind of accepting that this is part of your journey, part of the journey. You're supposed to be here. You're supposed to be here. Let's talk about just make sure you let me know if you don't understand any of this stuff. We'll just go through it until you understand it fully. It's cool. And if you don't get it this time, that's cool too. We can address it again in future. I don't know the natural time this stuff's supposed to take. Everybody's different, right? So, because if we come off like a little bit too friendly, it might seem a little bit patronizing. So I think we want to kind of come off as equals. And I think that's some of the thoughts on how to get feedback. All right. Key takeaways from tonight. Jen, why don't you start off? Key takeaways from tonight's conversation.
I think one of the biggest takeaways is to really set intention with conversations. And kind of when I came in, I think the whole permission to give your perspective and see if it's welcomed or not.
Yeah, set an intention and be clear on your intention. It shows goodwill. All right.
I love that you just said and see if it's welcomed, because while it may not be, respecting their decision also helps build relationship, and they may not be open to it then, but they might later.
True. That's true.
Yeah. So basically tonight has been all about, we're all going to face criticism no matter what in life. We want to avoid it as much as we can, the unnecessary stuff. Give disclaimers, show goodwill, show intent, honor and acknowledge other people's realities. Otherwise, they'll feel like they're being attacked. Validate their realities, and then try not to take anything personal. Confusion's not a crime. When you're right and other people criticize you, they're just confused. That's not a crime. We've all been confused. I'm still confused. I'm confused about 99.9% of everything in reality. Don't have expectation for better treatment. This is a rite of passage on the journey to your highest potential. As you get better, people might get jealous. Criticism keeps your ego small, which is a good thing. You're not being criticized, you're being contradicted. Have compassion for them. Somebody who acts in a mean way is lacking in love. They deserve more of our compassion, not less. So try to turn that into compassion, and you might actually be in a position to help them. And I think one of the things is, help people if you can, right? Help them if you can. We talked about giving feedback. If you can't help them, love them unconditionally. I go one of the two. And if they're not willing to be helped, but you love them unconditionally, that many ways has more of an impact. And I'll finish with one story that inspires me the most about criticism. There was this guy, okay, here's his book. My role model right here. This guy wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, okay? Steve Jobs' favorite book, George Harrison, a whole bunch of different people. It's a very famous book. He had one critic from India that thought he was a fraud, and he was putting defamatory comments out there, criticizing him his whole career. None of the criticisms were just, fair, or honest. This guy was attacking him, thinking he was a charlatan, right? Thinking he was fake, that he wasn't real. So he went to do a talk at the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles, and that critic was going to be there in person. They'd never met in person. That critic was there in person, and people knew this. This was like a 20-year thing of this critic attacking him. So what he did was he walked up to that critic, and they took photos, and he looked at him, and he said this, and you're thinking, what is he going to say? He finally meets this critic face to face. What is he going to say? He looks at him, and he says, just remember, I'm always going to love you. And then he turned and walked away. That's what he said. And then as Yogananda finished that talk, he made a poem about India. And as he finished the last sentence in the poem, he dropped dead in front of everybody. That was one of the last things he did. What an epic transition. And of course, I think as the story goes, that critic had left early and missed it. And he had a change of heart. He's like, I've been wrong about this guy the whole time, because the guy I thought he was would have never responded like that. The person I thought he was would have retaliated, got angry, but not like that. So then he's like, I need to make amends. And he's like, he's dead? He died at the end of his speech? Like, think about that. Open the guy's heart. It's the only way you can win the critic over. You can't reform people with anger. The only thing you could ever reform them with is unconditional love, and it'll happen in its own time. And that's really the challenge of criticism. It's a test and an opportunity to really have a massive impact. If you respond the way everyone else responds by getting offended, you're not really going to be able to help that soul. But if you respond with like unconditional love and compassion, people never forget that. They can't. It's ridiculous. They're like, you just totally won them over. That's the way to win that kind of a test and challenge. All right. Nothing but honor and respect for the two of you here on tonight's call, and nothing but honor and respect for anybody who's been sticking around and watching this call, who may be watching it at a future time. All of us have put our efforts together as an act of love for you, whoever you might be, because strangers care as we share this recording moving forward. We're all united in our efforts to just make sense of life and make sense of the confusion. And one aspect of that is criticism. And I hope tonight we've clarified, what our true intents deep down are and how we can best fulfill our true intents with those who might criticize us, so we can be the person that we're inspired to be in life. We all have that highest potential within us. And hopefully this gives us some strategy to be able to go out into the scenes of our life, like being in a movie, and be the character that we're proud of playing in this human story. All right, let's do this. We're going to do a go team on 3, because we're all a team and figuring this out together and making the best of our lives together. And we're all stronger for it. Nothing but love and respect to all of you. And by the way, both of you could criticize the crap out of me, say as many mean things as you want. I am never going to give up on any of you. I'll just be like, oh, all those crazy mean things Charmaine said about me. Pff, Charmaine, I'll wait for you to come back to your senses. I know you're better than this. And you'll know I'm authentic in our friendship, because I'm never going to give up on you, no matter how much you want to hate on me, right? I don't take myself too seriously, so who cares? Same with you, Jen. All right, friends forever, enemies for never on 3. You ready? 1, no head starts. 2, 3, friends forever, enemies for never. Go team, group hug.
Bye, guys. Have a good week.
Yeah, have a great week.